Hi there. I'm Smita Murthy, managing partner at Opencliff Partners. We're a product advisory and consulting firm. We help startup founders and CEOs scale up products through advisory and interim or fractional product leadership. We augment product leaders in mid to large size companies with achieving their positive business and customer outcomes by helping them with that third party perspective that gets business cases approved. Last but not the least, we provide product managers with career advice. This podcast series focuses on cross functional perspectives on what it takes to build successful products across domains and industries. I interview leaders from various functions with whom I've worked with to build and launch great products and the lessons we learned along the way. Today, I'm thrilled to host Gowri Sivaprasad. Gowri has been building software products for a very long time, 34 years. The last 20 has been focused on enterprise B2B SaaS and the consumer mobile and SaaS products. He has worked on products that have won 4 Webby and Fast Company awards. Gowri has been a global leader at various companies over the last 16 years. While a geek at heart, he has been part of the executive leadership team and has experienced how business and companies are run. Along with engineering leadership, Gowri has been the head of India GCC for multiple global companies in the last 16 years and has grown GCCs from nothing, from scratch, to over 1,000 people for both startups and mature companies. Gowri's and my path crossed when we were both at Rsam, where he headed up engineering for Rsam. I was running product. We've had a lot of great interactions during that time, and I'm thrilled to have you on this podcast today, Gowri. Welcome.
Hey, Smitha, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and hello, everyone.
Thank you. So let's start this off with something fun. Tell us a fun fact about yourself.
I am a Western classical pianist. I've been learning piano for about 10 plus years right now. I go through exams with Trinity College of Music in London. In another year or so, I will be at a high school diploma level in Western classical piano. So that's I started pretty late in life, but this is something that occupies my time and passion outside of work.
That is fantastic. I didn't know that. I didn't know that when we worked together and when we met. I know. So when we lived in India, my son was also learning music with the Trinity College. So it is a very rigorous program. So kudos to you for doing it whenever better late than never.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the passion outside of work right now.
That's fantastic. And what better passion to have than music? That's actually a common theme I've heard from several of my guests over time. So very happy to hear that. All right, let's dive right in.
Sure.
So, this podcast is really about talking about products. So tell me about something you remember from when we both worked together at RSAM and why that stands out for you.
Yeah, I mean, we were building like risk management products, and the one of the things I remember was like we had a lot of customers who were like very actively using the products, but then we also had a lot of ambitions like towards really transforming the product, technology transformations, and that really led to how do we balance tech debt versus features and what customers are looking for, and how do you build a holistic roadmap that is not just filled with small features that like every customer is asking for, rather like how are we optimizing for larger outcomes of the product. I remember like we had several discussions at the executive team level, and we like built a framework like with swim lanes and everything that allowed us to like categorize different categories of roadmaps and I mean and things to do. So that was a very important part of how we shaped the roadmap and also led us to actually be able to transform some of the things. At that point, like we were actually doing a lot of on-prem stuff and we wanted to move that to the cloud, and that was one of the big transformations that we were aiming for while balancing all the other like tactical needs.
Oh yeah, I remember those days. Do you remember also we had an external coach who came in for the whole agile transformation?
Absolutely.
Um, and so we were doing agile transformation, getting the teams organized into scrum teams, and then we were a cloud-based product, but not SaaS,
Yes.
because and it took me, I think it took me a little bit to kind of compute that and figure it out because I didn't know a couple of people who were on my team were doing these configurations all the time. I'm like, what are they configuring? And so I definitely remember that. So we had some tech debt from that we had to work through while we were building meaningful capabilities that customers appreciated. So yeah, I you're bringing
It
back
was both.
memories.
It was both operational transformation, like move, like agile and moving into that, as well as a more roadmap and technology transformation. So that
Yeah,
was like really interesting at that time.
yeah. I'll tell you what I remember about our interaction, and it's not often the same with I've worked with India-based engineering teams pretty much my whole career. I have worked in India as well, and for me, I think the most successful relationships are where we bring our each of our respective functional strengths to build the best products that we can. And where and I think that's what I remember about our interaction, Gauri, and the fantastic team you had built in India. And not to name names, but I still am in touch with a lot of those people because they were just phenomenal engineers. And so I want to give kudos to you for that because it makes building products so much easier with a very very solid engineering team, and I think many places I think that's where they kind of fall short. I've seen that in other companies where they don't invest in the right talent, they don't invest in the right level of leadership, and I think at Rsam we did that right. So thank you for that.
And I mean, I definitely very much remember like you brought a very strong, like a very clear thinking about product strategy and how do we need to build the product and how do we need to like go to market with that. I mean, like I think your time there, I mean, we really transformed that. Not just product strategy, but also like how we sold and how did we like build a go-to-market strategy around some of the key like changes that we were doing. So you certainly brought that mature product knowledge and product experience that helped us to kind of really marry that product as well as engineering into a very synergistic relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word. And I think, what I want the audience to take away is this relationship between product management and engineering is a make or break relationship for successful products. There's no two ways about it, right? When that relationship is not working, it's so much harder to build great
Oh,
products and launch great products.
I feel blessed about like like having worked with a number of like really strong product management leaders and that life is far easier when you have that melting of minds.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And before we go too far astray, one last point I want to make is, one of the reasons I joined RSAM was at the time, so the two co-founders interviewed me, and one of the co-founders who became my boss, he showed me the product as part of the interview process and said, tell me what you think. So that was part of the thing. And I remember thinking, okay, how do I tell him your baby's ugly? Right? It was because it
It
was
was.
so it required a lot of help, and I think I since I got the job, I think I found a diplomatic way of telling him while telling him that there's a lot of work to be done. But this is one of the so I just recently had one of my UX leaders on the podcast series, and more companies are investing in UX, and I think that just makes for greater products. Anyway, enough of that. So tell me about a B2B enterprise SaaS product. You've been doing this for a long time. What is the one where you've helped start, build, um, sell or grow that you're really, really fond of, and what made it special?
Sure. So this was prior to our time at RSAM. So I was working for a very um, mid-size to large. It wasn't a startup, enterprise B2B company, and we had a suite of products that were flagship, but pretty old, like legacy versions. And we made a strategic decision to build a next generation of, like, there were four products in the flagship suite, and we said we should go build a next generation rather than just do incremental changes and updates. Like, let's go build a brand new next generation version, and with a new team. It was very complex product with like very that worked across like 150 countries, and there was extremely like large business logic as well as configuration. It was done with a brand new team. We built a brand new team, and the mandate to them was, you got to build every line of code from scratch. You can't take anything from the older version and use it here. So the strategy was, we'll continue just maintaining the legacy version. There's a team that is doing that, and we're going to build the next generation of the product. I think in the enterprise, like B2B world, it's very rare that you actually get to build a product from the first line of code, really start from scratch with the learnings and things like that, which is one of the reasons it's very memorable to me. Is that like, got to see building a very large product from scratch, from the first line of code. We were able to really focus on like architecture and the right architecture and building that. It was a team of about like 80 people, and it took about 3 years to a first customer, with a launch with a reference customer. But it was also memorable for other reasons. Like, we definitely like made mistakes on the way. Like anything that's like a 3-year project, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. One of the big, like, definitely something to highlight was, for example, we were in the enthusiasm and the like, hey, let's go build features. At some point, we realized we hadn't taken care of the quality. Like, it was starting to kind of fall apart. It's like you're just building it. So a big lesson where we actually had to pause and kind of regroup with respect to quality. And a big lesson there was, you're building something like that, you got to keep keep track of quality. You got to keep quality up to date as you go. Like, you can't build for years and then come back and say, let me fix quality after that, right? It just doesn't work. You got to do this as you go. And we made some of these mistakes, learned from it, and then regrouped, and there were a lot of very interesting. I'll probably get to that at some point during this conversation, like where we had some challenges, like between like product and engineering, and also just thinking through that. But it was very memorable because it was a brand new effort, and successfully. I mean, we successfully launched it with a reference customer in about 2.5, 3 years time. It's still going, it's still growing, going very strong, and the product still is very much used. But that was something that I'm really fond of, really memorable, because that was a, you're not just doing something incremental, you actually we created something.
That's fantastic. For me, I always and same goes for product management, right? Very rarely do you get to build a brand new product from scratch,
Yeah.
or define, like to kind of conceive it, to kind of do the market research, to do the customer interviews, get the voice of the customer, get the UX going, do all of that upfront work, which we all know the studies have shown the more of this that you do and the faster you build after that, the better product market fit you're going to have versus you know in the old days when we were doing waterfall, we would write this massive MRD and PRD, and
Yeah.
by the time that got implemented and a product actually came out, the market had moved on, right?
Yeah.
So I think having those opportunities where you can build a product from scratch is like a Christmas present. You don't get it often, but when you get it, do it right, because a product built right with from first principles, and with all the best practices in the industry, it reaps benefits. A testament to that is it's been a long time since we were at Rsam, but like before that you did this product and it's still going. So it stood the test of time.
The test of
Uh,
time. But in hindsight, I mean, this was about like 13, 14 years ago. Like today, probably like nobody would take a 3-year leap of faith to actually build it.
Correct.
It's probably going to be far more iterative and incremental than let's launch version one after 3 years. There certainly, I think today the world moves much faster.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Since you worked with both startups and mid and large size companies, um, in the tech startups that you worked at, when do you think the product management, like a disciplined product management approach, is a requirement that kind of comes about, where I've worked with a handful of startups myself, and sometimes a tech founder will build a product, right, because they know how to build a product, but then it's often after, when you're looking to scale up, that like a disciplined product approach is becomes a little bit more necessary. So what has your experience been in that?
I think the answer to that is it's not when you have reached product market fit. It's actually beyond that, right? Where a product market fit gives you an idea of, okay, this is kind of the product we need to build. This is, but a point where true disciplined product everything really becomes critical is when you have achieved a level of repeatable sales, that you're able to, you have a pipeline of customers, you have kind of cracked that formula of how to do your sales. At that point you just cannot do things ad hoc. Like, you have a pipeline, you're scaling customers, you have to establish like the various different processes, from like customer support to customer success to really figuring out your roadmap. You can't just like wing it along the way at that stage. Like, you have enough muzzle at that point to really invest in. But I mean, that's a lot of companies start immediately like getting into a very mature discipline state at product market fit. Maybe that's a little too early. You still don't know how you're going to shape your sales, like go to market strategy, go to market pipelines.
Yeah, no, perfect. Because hopefully I wasn't leading the witness, but that's my thesis as well with OpenCliff, that when products are at scale up stage, that's when disciplined product management becomes necessary. So that said, what kind of key metrics do you track to determine the success with products?
I would categorize metrics into two big buckets. One is the business or the like market related metrics. The other is more internal. When I think about like business metrics, one it's not a numerical metric, but it's still a judgment call. But one of the thing I would look for is how easy is it for a prospective customer to understand what's the value you're bringing. Yeah, how easy is it for a go-to-market team to tell the story, right, to a prospective customer? If it is too complicated to for a customer to understand how it would help them, it's not going to be easy. You got to simplify, you got to like bring it to a state where the value is well understood. The second metric I would look at is what's the time to value post your sale, right? I mean, that's where, especially in enterprise, B2B, either SaaS or on-prem, a lot of sales fails. A lot of these things go and don't go very well is because you sold it to a customer, but then it takes way too long for them to get to a time to value, right? I mean, get to a value. That's a very key metric to say, are you able to get to that value in a reasonable amount of time, right? So that points to a lot of like product architecture, simplicity, implementation, a lot of those kind of things. Beyond that, more numerically, a couple of things I would look at is your sales growth. I mean, like, are you able to continue to sell? But also, usage growth, right? This is something that I've been burnt in. Like I've seen cases where a customer like failed to renew, and in hindsight, when we went and looked, they had not been using the product at all for almost 6 to 9 months. Like we literally went back and looked at the logs, and nobody from that customer had ever logged in for the like 8 to 9 months. So I would certainly look for like leading indicators like that, metrics around usage and usage growth as a key like validator of value that is being transmitted to the customer, and also that hey, the customer has actually doing something if there is a drop in usage, that's a red flag you got to act upon. Go back and see what's not working and have those conversations. So certainly something to
Absolutely.
keep an eye
Yep.
on, right?
Yeah, no, I think I really want to highlight the third metric you talked about, which is that usage, right? I cannot stress enough how important it is to have instrumentation in your code and some sort of tracking mechanism so that you know exactly what people are doing, for example, what workflow is working, what is not, where are people getting stuck. So, and I mean, the good news is when you have that instrumentation, A, you know they're using it, and B, you know what they're using.
Yes.
And what might have been a feature you thought would be your like next big thing may or may not be your next big thing. It may be the tried and true that continues to provide value for them. So that's one thing. The second thing I would highlight is usage, and it's important to make sure that you don't have a leaky bucket. Do you remember? Does that ring bells when we were working together, especially for smaller companies? Customer acquisition, that has a cost. It has a cost. And once you've incurred it, you want to keep those customers renewing time after time. Because if you don't, and if you have a leaky bucket and many are not renewing, and you still have to put that upfront cost to acquire the customer, it becomes unsustainable, especially when you're looking at growing, when you're looking to grow. And your point about, if you see the red flags, if you don't act upon it right away, that leads to the leaky bucket.
Yes.
So
churn.
customer success, exactly. Customer success, customer support, all of that is super critical, especially for large enterprise customers, because that's the standard we've set. We're not talking about consumer products here, right? We're talking about B2B enterprise SaaS products. There's an expectation of, hey, I'm going to achieve my business outcome by using your product. So if I'm not, then I'm going to be like, no, I don't want to renew.
Yes,
So
I
I
mean
think
that's
super
a very.
critical to keep track of all of those metrics. Yep.
I mean,
Sounds great.
you're reaching value, but are you continually getting the value? And that, like you said, that instrumentation becomes super critical. I mean, it even helps to shape your roadmap. Like, hey, where are the key, like what features, what pages, what kind of things are customers most using? So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
instrumentation really helps us to like pivot to different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with that more.
On
Great.
internal, so just internal metrics. I mean, just a couple of these internal metrics. One, I especially between product and engineering, one of the things that I look for is what is the durability of our top priorities. If as a company, if our top priorities keep changing every month, every quarter, there's something that's like missing, or there's something that's going wrong. Like the durability of like, hey, like if this is your top priority, it should stay a top priority for a while. And that influences your resourcing, capitalist like allocation, all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right? I mean, that is one thing that I would look for. Other like pretty like standard metrics that a lot of people do, like how good are teams in estimating things. To me, that's very important, because if your plans to actuals are really way off, then your planning system becomes a ambiguous thing. Like you really cannot plan very well for the future if you're not able to anticipate and estimate for the right kind of things. The other thing, again, related to usage and or leaky buckets, like your customer like production incident related metrics, like that's a key indicator of not just quality, but also the kinds of problems that customers face. It's a indicator of just like basic, NPS kind of customer NPS kind of metrics that you can get out of that to say like, is the customer happy? The
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
one the other one that is becoming extremely important, especially in the last few years, is I think both product and engineering leaders should look at the gross margin of the product. One
Oh,
of
yeah.
the one of the key reasons is these days with everything being on the cloud, and it is very easy for your cloud costs to like skyrocket in unmanageable ways, that essentially you might be selling well, but if your gross margins are not healthy, you're not profitable. And one of the key levers there these days is like, are you managing your cloud costs really well? Are you managing your cloud assets really well? And there's a lot of technology, but it's easy for that to run away in terms of like your cloud millions and millions of dollars, and that's not going to help you. So keeping a very close eye on like financial metrics, like your gross margin of the product, like a product and engineering leader should know the P&L of your product.
Absolutely. So, three very good points you made. One is, we talked about the estimation. The estimation, that is, so the promise of agile, when you're beyond the storming, norming, oh, I missed one. Storming, forming, norming, and performing. So if you're at that performing stage, then you've really mastered how to estimate. Many large enterprise B2B SaaS products, you're not yes, you have a potentially shippable piece of something every 2 weeks, but it's generally not shipped every 2 weeks, even
Yeah.
though the code may be ready, because you may have a release cadence of, let's say, a quarterly release or whatever, because large enterprises don't want that kind of disruption. If you're a consumer based product, of course, like, if you're a Facebook is continuously updating and it doesn't present any problem to the end user. So one is that estimation. And I think the more mature the orgs are, the product management and engineering orgs, the better we get at estimations. And hopefully, after you start, it starts to narrow down where you can be fairly precise with the effort required to get a piece of a feature or a story done. So that I think super important, and super important to recognize that if you're just introducing agile, it doesn't happen right away, right? That I think for me, that was like one of the biggest things that I've had to communicate to leadership over several roles where I ended up being an agile champion for the company, not by choice, but because, sometimes it's just kind of what you have to do. And I think it's important to understand that till you get to that norming and performing stage, the estimations will be off,
Yeah.
right? You're getting better and better, but it's not going to be perfect the first time. And I think to keep that in mind, because many people think, oh, we're agile, so we need to be able to do things in an agile way. And that goes to your first point you made about shiny new objects.
Yeah.
I call that the chasing the shiny new objects phenomenon, which occurs all the time, especially in um, more mature products or even products where teams are trying to make a certain sales quota. The salesperson thinks, hey, this is what we should be building. It'll help me make my quota. But especially when you're trying to scale up, if you're distracted all the time by
Mm.
something new that pops in, of
Yeah.
course, if there's like a dramatic market change, to be responsive to that, Agile gives you that ability to be responsive to that. But at the same time, your true cornerstones of your strategy cannot be ignored.
Correct.
Um, if you keep changing your mind all the time, that perhaps is an indicator to you that you may not have a robust strategy or a robust go forward strategy to start with, right? And those are times for me, I feel like people like us who've kind of been in the industry a long time, we start to see those patterns quite quickly, and we're able to identify this is kind of what you need to do. So great point on shiny new object tracking and the estimation. So completely agree on all of those metrics. All right, just moving on. What is the biggest challenge you've faced with products? What would you do differently if you could do over?
One, uh, I think that I've seen this in at least four or five companies, B2B enterprise, and I mean cloud-based or SaaS or not necessarily for true SaaS, especially with more of cloud-based on-prem kind of things, is the burden of legacy versions and version sprawl. I mean, especially for a company in a journey to become more true SaaS, the burden of legacy versions and version sprawl, that is one, certainly a challenge that I've seen in products. The other is what I would call the curse of choice, right? I mean, like, you have too many things you could do. How are you able to narrow down your focus to achieve big outcomes? And are you able to identify those priorities very clearly, right? With the problems of version sprawl, one of the key lessons after like many years of struggling with customers, getting customers to upgrade, and having to manage and maintain like old versions for like decade or more than that. My counterintuitive lesson has been, listen less to your customers, say no to your customers even more, because the reality is customers who are sitting in a legacy version um, have that risk awareness to change,
Yep.
which in really, if they move to more modern like SaaS and everything, their like TCOs could actually be less. Their pain points could actually be less. They might actually get better value faster. But that resistance to change, and if you, the more you listen to saying, I want that exact same thing in this thing. I give me a fix in the same version that I'm in. Like sometimes you just have to say, no, that's not possible. You got to move ahead. It's not like the best answers that a customer might get, but at the end of the day, it's more a little bit like parenting them to say like, this is going to be good for you, right? I mean, like, it's going to be harder in the short term, but in the longer run, this is going to be good for you. So a counterintuitive thing is to say no, like, don't just feed that like resistance to change, but see if we can get out of it. I mean, that's been a hard fought lesson over the past like 15 years.
Yeah, and it's also a remnant of not being truly SaaS. Like
Yes.
if you're true multi-tenant SaaS, then all your tenants will get upgraded anytime you have a new release. But it's when you're kind of straddling that ground between being a cloud-based product and
Yeah.
wanting to be a SaaS product, true SaaS product, that's when you kind of run
Yeah.
into
If you're
those
a
problems.
startup building from scratch through multi-tenant SaaS, you
Yeah,
never see these kind of problems. But for companies
exactly.
who've been around for like 15 years, they've absolutely seen that problem. And the interesting thing for me is across like five different companies, the problems and the situations have been exactly the same, right? And you
Yeah,
have to apply the same strategies, same thing. So every company is going through with like very similar problems.
yeah, yeah,
That's
totally
the thing.
agree. Totally agree. So switching gears a little bit on you. Um, Today, so I was listening to an interesting webinar yesterday about the AI hype, right? There
Mhm.
have been hype cycles. You know, we all use AI with or without realizing everywhere, right? So how is AI, Gen AI, or agentic AI changing how we build products? Specifically for engineering, what are the blessings and curses of what we have available?
There's two sides to Gen AI. One is what are you offering to your customer? Second, how are you using Gen AI internally, right? Internally, again, there are a lot of tools like the Chat GPTs and the Copilots and the Geminis of the world. But for engineering, like one of the tools that we've actually found a good value for is like GitHub Copilot, right? I mean, it helps us to write a lot of templatized code, recode certain things. Like if you give it a pattern, like there are many situations where, for example, here I am doing this for this table in the database, but I have to do the same thing for 50 other tables. I got to script it for 50 other tables. It's going to be able to help you to automate a lot of that kind of like mundane stuff. The second actually very useful use case that we actually found through actually internal like hackathons that we had engineers go through is it is Copilot is actually like GitHub Copilot is actually very good at writing documentation. Like you have APIs, it's able to generate pretty good documentation in pretty standard formats. It's able to like take simple things and convert it into much more polished customer facing things. So that is one area where it has reduced the like the amount of manual, more mundane work, right? Um,
Yep.
the other area where we are actually trying out more and more to see how it helps is when you have customer like problems or like incidents or issues, like how is it able to help an engineer to debug through a situation? This is
Mm.
complicated use case. We have seen some level of success for it to be able to say, like for example, here are a couple of values. take those values like parameters and trace it through this code and tell us where it's going to fail or it's going to error out, or where is it actually, like a combination of code plus logs and things like that to be able to help to trace certain things. We it's at least for me, like it is still not in a mature state where we can say like, hey, it's able to debug through a problem. It still needs a lot of human touch, or we are still, again, probably not using the tool to the level of maturity that it might have. But it's still a learning curve. It's still learning. The other thing that I'm actually trying to apply, or would be actually good, is we generate a lot of data internally, from bugs to stories to a lot of like maybe usage metrics to like monitoring and observability metrics. Like, how can we apply that to generate some insights out of it? I think that's a very useful scenarios where like Gen AI can crank through a bunch of data and give us some insights. It's still very, very early stages, but that's one I would love to like dig deeper and see, as a leader, are you able to like use metrics even today? Like, we have like Copilot sitting in Excel, and is it how well are we able to use that to do some interesting things or generate some insights into it? Can it like automatically create some pivots for you that give us that nugget of wisdom? So things like that, I
Yeah.
think, are important use cases that we just got to keep trying and see how well are we able to get value out of it.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you're the first person I've hosted who's actively using it, and that's why I wanted to make sure we get to this question. Because that's kind of been the general consensus, right? Like anything customer facing, we have to make sure there's no bias, make sure there's no hallucination, like all the known issues, right? With AI. And I think using it for efficiency, using it for automation, I think those are perfect use cases to start with. And I will also go ahead and say, people don't have to invent new use cases to use AI, because everyone wants to be an AI company today, right? It's Someone mentioned this, and I think I'm gonna steal it. It's old bottle, new wine, or new bottle, old wine.
Hmm.
For people who've been doing this a while, this is yet another technology evolution that you need to use for solving. At the end of the day, people are paying you for solving a business problem they have so that they can make money and be successful.
Yeah.
And if using AI will make them successful faster, great, they'll buy it. If if you don't use AI but you're able to solve it better in some other way, that's what they want. They really don't care what you're using technology wise. It's like how are you solving the problem? How efficiently are you solving the problem? How quickly can you solve the problem that they're purchasing your product
I'll
for?
actually give you a counterpoint to that. One of the things we are actually seeing is there are more and more customers who are like, hey, do you use Gen AI in your products? Like, it becomes a checkbox even very early in a sales cycle, or even with existing
Correct.
customers, right? So customers should really be looking for, what value am I getting? What are the outcomes? Like, is it solving a problem? But there's still like, that is where there is obviously that whole, I don't want to say hype, but all the news around, all the things that are going around, like everybody wants to see, hey, am I getting some Gen AI value out of your products? Like, even with like P's and VC firms, and like, hey,
Yeah,
do you have Gen AI in your product?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, with customers, my recent experience with customers has been acknowledge the importance and the use cases where this is valid. But if you're just more honest about, hey, this is where we're using it, this is where it can be helpful, and these are some unknowns, just giving a very realistic picture, I've had customers truly appreciate it because everyone's facing that same pressure. They're making a buying decision and they have a checklist. It could be an RFP, and in the RFP you could be like, hey, does this product have AI, Gen AI, whatever? And they're like going through a checklist. Whether it'll really matter or not, I think it's important. And I think this falls upon the product manager a lot, where they need to know enough to set the right context for
Right.
why or why not, right? And I think so I'm just fascinated by how this space is evolving. Completely agree with you on the VC and PE front. So I spent a year in that universe, and I can tell you everybody is obviously looking for that's the next big thing, but has it paid the returns, is, I think, a question that people are starting to ask.
Yeah, I think it's
So,
still very early stages of that. See, one of the other interesting things I have observed, especially in the enterprise SaaS world, as compared to like consumer like use of Gen AI, is most enterprise B2B products are part of an ecosystem, right? The true value of Gen AI is going to come from building insights and doing some things with like data sitting across that ecosystem. But for a lot of companies, you only have access probably to the data that you in your product. Like that's a like if you're a financial services firm, like you only have a limited view of the data that you have. Like, but for your customer, the true value of GenAI is going to come from being able to bring all of that ecosystem data from
that's
different,
it.
and that's a hard problem to solve because each of that is different products, different PII, all kinds of things. So how do you bring that together to solve a much bigger problem that is of bigger value to that customer? But you got to then be able to integrate that ecosystem. I think that's unique to the enterprise B2B world. Yeah, otherwise, you're just solving
Absolutely.
it just for your product. You're not truly bringing the bigger insights to your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. All right. Almost time to wrap up. Any book recommendations that you have for our audience related to products or otherwise?
Sure, sure. I'm a big book nerd, so yeah, I'll recommend like three books, 3 or 4 books. Couple of things I anybody asks for book recommendations, I give these 2 books. Whatever role you are in, whatever you're doing. One is it's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's all about negotiation, and I always say most things in life and personal or professional, there is a negotiation, right? And that books really talks about like how you could build on your negotiation skills. The second one is Six Thinking Hats. Especially in the professional world, there is a lot of decision making, lots of meetings, and that's a path breaking book that can help to bring better decision making, like frame process into it. How do you get to like a people with a lot of conflict about different opinions? How do you bring that together? That is one very 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 useful book. From a pure product development perspective, one of the books that was recommended to me, specifically by that agile coach that we actually got
Yeah,
when we were at Rsam, I remember he
yeah.
recommended one book. I found that like fantastic book. It's called Principles of Product Development Flow by Donald Reinerstein. It's
Awesome.
actually a very heavy book, like it's not like a quick read. It goes into a lot of kind of math and things like that. But for somebody who's truly like living that world of product development, I would highly recommend that book because it goes into very interesting nuances of, for example, how should you use things like cycle time to optimize what you do. And it actually goes into a lot of that metrics and how to calculate those metrics. It uses like queuing theory and a lot of other things. It's a very deep book, but you don't have to read the whole book, but there are pieces like you could take really good value out of like small pieces of that book. That's a book that has stayed with me like for many, almost what about 10, 15 years now.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I'm sure the readers, the listeners to this podcast will appreciate the reading recommendations. I definitely noted down the first two. I don't think I want to go into the third one. I'm
But
good.
you should take a look at it. It's a very interesting. Just topics would very much interest you. It's for anybody doing product development, it goes into it in like incredible amount of detail.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So, Gowri, it was such a pleasure to have you on. It's been a while since we have interacted and talked. It brought back good memories of our time at Rsam. Thank you again for being a guest. I appreciate it. And there you go, folks. You've had your engineering masterclass right there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Smitha. Thanks for inviting, and it was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.